Welcome to MarketPulse, Pros and Pioneers. Each week, we talk with industry leaders in both marketing and entrepreneurship and business to find out all about their wins and failures in marketing. Right now, we'll hear all about their successes and wins and what's fallen flat so that you can take that knowledge and implement it. Learn from the best, from the folks who've been there and done it all, as well as people just like you. Thanks for joining us. This is MarketPulse, Pros and Pioneers.
And welcome to this week's MarketPulse Pros and Pioneers podcast. And this week I have the absolute pleasure to meet Mads Singers, who's been classy enough to come onto the show. Thank you very much for joining us, Mads.
Well, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me, Paul.
No problem at all. No problem at all. If you've never joined MarketPulse before, we're aimed at small to medium business owners who are perhaps wearing lots and lots of hats like I do, and aimed at helping share marketing knowledge. So none of us got into business expecting to be experts at marketing, and yet it's a pretty crucial skill for most of us. Marketing, sales, all those sorts of things that you just don't think about when you decide that you're going to set your own business up and get running. And I wanted to build MarketPulse in a way that helps share either expertise from marketers who've been there and done it and have got lots of clients and have been through the mill many, many times, and also from business owners, either just like ourselves, who are still in the early throes of figuring things out and sharing tips and tricks as to what works, and more experienced business owners like Mads, who've run lots of different types of businesses in lots of different areas and can share both expertise in marketing and expertise in business. So real pleasure to have you on, Mads. Hi, and thanks for joining us for the show. I'm Paul, founder here at Javelin Content Management. We specialize in getting ideas out of your head, down into video, and out to your social media through repurposing and efficient content strategies. If you want to find out how you can convert your ideal audience into paying customers, reach out to us, javelincontent.com, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So you've been around some big businesses. You've worked with companies like Xerox and IBM. And then you've also run your own coach and consulting business for quite some time. 6 businesses under your belt, quite a lot of employees there. You've sampled lots and lots of different sizes of business, areas of business, types and styles of business as well, which is quite an unusual mix. So congratulations on putting all that together and but still being here to tell the story, because I can vouch for the fact of, I've been in business myself 13 months. And I've aged. I looked 21 when I started last year. For those of you that are on audio, you'll have to go and find me on LinkedIn to see what I mean. But I've aged rapidly. I'm going to come to you first of all, then, Mads, for your interesting fact, which I think is something that will make a lot of people out there smile. Because I think there's times in the day when I feel like doing exactly what you've done. So tell us a little bit about your fun fact, if you would.
Yeah, I think I guess from an interesting from an audience standpoint, I spent a significant part of my life living in my backpack. So the last 10 years, I've traveled a lot. So I go around, speak at a lot of events, and do a lot of coaching with clients all around the world. And that means I spend a lot of time traveling. And I learned many years ago in the corporate world that you don't check in luggage, because when you check in luggage, there's a risk of luggage disappearing, which is a risk of you might end up at a client site, or you might end up somewhere without the stuff you need. And that is not a risk you run. So in the corporate world, I learned to always fit everything. I would say up to 2 weeks into a sort of hand carry luggage. And basically, when I went on my own, I left the UK. So I was living in the UK at the time, and I went on my own back in 2013, and I basically let go of everything I had and everything I needed, put it in a backpack, and I can still do that today, 10, 11 years later. And that means, 13, 14 kilos or so is usually what I can push it down to. And for me, it's a lot of it is part of freedom. I think not owning a whole pile of stuff, not being sort of committed to a lot of things and so on is very, very nice. During COVID, I was, let's call it, stuck in Vietnam. Meaning I was in Vietnam for a year and a half, where we were celebrating not having so much COVID like everyone else, but it was such a nice feeling to leave after being there for a year and a half, because again, just naturally you accumulate a bunch of stuff, and just let go of it, packing my backpack and traveling to Europe again was very freeing. So I very much appreciate that.
That's an amazing story. And yeah, I'm not sure I could even get down to 25 kilos, never mind 13. That's a fantastic story. And I guess speaks volumes to your own business ethos as well around focus and intention. But before we kind of dive into that too much, if you would like to share just a 5-minute version of how you got where you are, and you've already answered one of my questions around, in your bio, you mentioned that you run the SEO Mastery Summit in Vietnam every year. And one of my questions was going to be, why Vietnam and SEO and how does that fit together?
Yeah,
But I guess you've kind of answered that. I'd love to hear the rest of the story though.
sure. Yeah, so I left the corporate world first time in 2013, and there was yeah, it was like everyone else. It's interesting doing that. I was already doing client work at the site, so I was already coaching people and so on. So it wasn't too difficult to leave in the first place. Um, I then realized that I was living near Glasgow, and I realized it was raining every day, and I'm like, hey, why spend time living in Glasgow when you could live somewhere where it rains less and less taxes and, you know, yeah, a lot of options. So initially, back in 2014 or so, I moved to the Philippines and stayed there for a few years, was living there for a good few years and traveling a good bit. Initially, I didn't travel that much so, but yeah, then I started 2014 or maybe early 15, I started an outsourcing company because many of the clients that I was working with, I could see they really struggled to hire good people. And as I had moved to the Philippines at the time, I was physically there. And obviously, with my management background, I was both great at hiring people and hiring great people. And secondly, I was, yeah, very good at helping people doing so as well. And that turned into a relatively big business that we still own and run. So I have a great team of people who runs that today. And since then, started a bunch of other companies. So we have, as you mentioned, we have the SEO Mastery Summit in Saigon, which is obviously the best SEO conference in the world. And it takes place in March. So next year, March 10th, where, yeah, we have people flying in from US, Europe, Australia, everywhere in the world to really congregate and, yeah, enjoy one of the best SEO events around. Lots of amazing networking and lots of great speakers and all this good stuff. And yeah, build up a job site in South Africa, which is one of the places we love hire. We own a SaaS tool called HeyVamp, which is again around management and sort of personality tests and things like that, which is fantastic. And have an in-house SEO company. Uh, yeah. So have lots of good businesses, as you mentioned, lots of very different type of businesses, but the majority of them sort of evolve around online businesses, right? So it's all companies that are selling to online business owners. And yeah, that's sort of our focus.
I guess it's almost like a mini venture studio, if you like, of a complementary ecosystem built to enable what it is that your regular clients do. Um,
To, to an
I
extent,
find that
yeah.
I find that genuinely really fascinating because I've got a background where I was for 4 years or so selling directly to outsourcers and BPOs and contact centers for SaaS technology, and I understand that world really really well. It's an amazing world full of really passionate people, but I think there's a real niche for us to quickly dive into here, which is around finding offshore talent that is reliable and can prioritize in a way that makes sense for you as an onshore business. Because I speak to a lot of business owners who want to offshore, they want to outsource their market, and they want to get it off their plate. Onshore is quite expensive, acknowledged as being probably easier to set up because there's no language barrier, there's no, kind of change to time zones and things like that. Um, what would be your advice to a small business owner who wanted to get involved, get an outsourced team, get set up? How would you suggest that they go about starting that process to make sure that they land it well?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, as I mentioned, one of our favorite places in the world to hire is South Africa. And it is significantly more affordable than the UK. and generally say what you want about the British people, but it can be hard to find a lot of great people, right? A lot of people are more busy running to the pub at 5 p.m. than anything else, right? So generally the work morale and everything in South Africa is great. And we have, I think about 70% of the people we are hiring now is being hired in South Africa. Again, time zone in South Africa, very similar to UK. So not really much time zone issues and all that jazz. And yeah, generally, fundamentally for me, we have lots of clients that goes through this. And I would say the key things is you still need to learn to manage. So it doesn't really matter. Like people call it outsourcing or VAs. I just call it resources, right? Like when you hire people, it doesn't really matter to me if you hire them in UK or South Africa or somewhere else. When someone works for you, it's about learning how to manage them well. And a lot of time, the main reason why people don't get the most out of sort of outsourced labor is because they treat them as lower cost labor. And fundamentally, people are people. To treat them like an employee, they will generally deliver good stuff if you know people in the first place, right? So you can just get just as much out of someone who lives halfway around the world as elsewhere, right? And that's really, for me, the probably the number one key thing is really treat them as a regular employee. Have frequent conversations with them, be clear on your expectations and so on. And the mentality in South Africa is very similar to Western Europe, right? And US even. And yeah, it's often, you half price or sometimes even lower in terms of cost for finding very, very, very good people. So probably something we enjoy. And yeah, people can obviously hit up something like a risk sourcing, and there's many other companies that can help hire as well. So that's also an option. And people can also do it themselves. For example, looking at LinkedIn or something, it's relatively easy to find talent.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And yeah, things that I've heard myself echoed in the industry. So I know the truth of a lot of what you've just said. But great to hear it from somebody else as opposed to me having to share my own experience all the time. So to come round to the general questions that I ask on the podcast each week, and the first of those being, what is one marketing technique, framework, panel, technology that you wish people would use more? What is the secret key to marketing in your eyes for a small to medium business?
Well, I'm happy people don't use it more because that would make it more difficult for me, I guess. But for me, the number one thing is definitely networking. Majority of my business have been started at the back of networking. That I go to a lot of events, I go to a lot of conferences, and particularly in the early days of a business, like so many people are sitting around trying to spam social media, constantly trying like, hey, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. But what I've always found is the easiest way to get a business off the ground is going out and meeting people in person. Because when you build relationships, when you meet real people, when you show them who you are, when you show them you're trustworthy, hopefully you show them you're trustworthy, you're significantly more likely to get clients on board. And that for me have always worked fantastically well. The outsourcing company we built the first 2 years without even having a website, and we had over 100 staff at the time, right? So we really grew from 0 to 100 in a couple of years with predominantly focused on networking. Obviously helps. I mean, I do a bunch of speaking as well, and that obviously helps as well. But generally going and meeting people in person is absolute game changer.
Fantastic. I love that. And I guess, so if people are going to go networking, what's the best advice you can give them to get the most out of that experience then?
So a couple of pieces of advice I would say. That number one is go where your clients are. What I see with a lot of people, particularly in marketing, is they go to their own marketing channels. So if they're doing pay-per-click, they go to pay-per-click events. But most people go to pay-per-click events, no pay-per-click, right? So if you are working with plumbers, then go to plumbing events. If you're working with SaaS businesses, go to SaaS business events. Go where your customers are, not necessarily where your peers are. Or you can obviously do both because there's a good mix between learning and getting new clients, but be aware of the fact that, where's my clients? Where's my audience? So I think that's the first one. Second one, I think it's for a lot of people, particularly if you're introvert, it takes a little bit of effort. I am extremely introvert by nature, but learning to, stick out your hand and say, "Hey, my name is Matt," and start a conversation is exceptionally valuable. And took me a long time to learn, me a long time to master, if you will. And yeah, I think it's about pushing yourself. I think starting a business, starting on your own, is very much sort of a pressure game, if you will. And I think it's very, very important to make sure that you really put some pressure on yourself to learn and to grow through that experience, and not just stay in your comfort zone.
Amazing. I love that advice. I love that advice. And yeah, I'm intimidated by in-person networking events, like hands on heart. I love networking. I love connecting people. I love putting people together, and I do a lot of it digitally. I live in the northeast of England, so there aren't that many networking events that are suited to my client base up here. A lot of them tend to be down the south of the country or the Midlands or the northwest. So I kind of struggle for good quality networking events up here anywhere. But that certainly resonates with me, and it ties in with something I say to people quite a lot, and maybe I need to take my own advice is just eat the damn frog, right? If you've got something that you really don't want to do, there's a reason you don't want to do it, but your competition also don't want to do it. So if you're brave enough to do it and do it regularly and consistently, you will beat the competition. So absolutely, I love that. I love that. And then I guess to the other side of the tracks, then what's the one thing that you would? Thanks very much for joining us today. And if you've enjoyed the episode, please come back for next week's episode for another fantastic guest here on MarketPulse Pros and Pioneers. Or might work for others, but it's for a niche audience, maybe.
What I see from many people is actually, and it's not just marketing, but it's kind of taking it a step up, if you will, is really a lot of people when they start out, they don't understand to nail down their process, right? So the reason I've been relatively successful with all the business I've started is really because I've focused on nailing down a process and like, what is it you do? And the thing is, most people are like, "Oh, I do social media." But what the hell is social media? Social media is not a process. It's not scalable. It's not like you have to really understand. Do you want to be a freelancer with a well-paid job? That's fine, right? But if you're serious about starting a business is about processes or a process in particular, right? And generally, what I say to people when you're starting out a new business, you want to really find out what is the one thing that you do exceptionally well that is repeatable and scalable and can be done over and over again. So it's not a question of doing social media. That's not a big thing. It is a question of nailing it down and saying, what exactly in social media are you good at? Like that doesn't even have to be Instagram. That could be Instagram Reels. Like if you have a particular process of how you produce Instagram Reels and you want to niche down in that, fantastic, right? The better you can document it, the more you can clarify exactly what you do and how you do it, the easier it is to scale something like that, right? But when you're trying to be a social media company, what happens is, first of all, you end up going out hiring people like yourself who hopefully know a whole bunch of different things about a whole bunch of different things, but no one is great at everything. And it's so hard to get consistent results when you're not focused on a process, right? So when you look at it, when you're looking at big companies like Coca-Cola, McDonald's and the likes, they're successful because they're focused on a very, very particular process, right? So what you really want to do in the early days, that is focus on a particular process. That also makes your marketing significantly easier because typically it sort of brings out very clearly what exactly you're doing and who you're doing it for, right? So a friend of mine, as example, recently started a company in the real estate space, and his core focus is editing existing businesses, existing pictures from real estate companies, real estate agents and the like. So what he realizes, many of these people, they take pictures, but they often don't look great. So his entire service is helping make all of these photos they take better, because if they look better, they're more likely to sell. So that his entire process is saying, okay, here's a whole pile of photos. What is our process to make them better? and he built a nearly 7-figure business now over the last couple of years doing just that, right? So you don't have to to build a good business. You don't have to do a ton of things, right? Most people make the mistake in the beginning. They're like this, anyone that do anything with this, come my way. But really, a company succeeds when you do this. And this is where any company starts succeeding, is when they've been in business for a while and they realize, oh, we really like this customer segment. But really, you can do that from day one, right? Like you can really, and you want to do it really. You want to hone in and what is the one thing that you're great at doing, and what is, because many people, many of the clients I work with, they're like, oh well, if I'm not there, the business crash and burn because I'm the only one that can. And what I tell them all is, when you're the only one that can, it means you haven't clarified your offer. You haven't nailed down your process. Because the second you nail down a process, it's relatively easy to break it down into pieces and get different people to do different pieces of that process.
I guess there's also the addition to all that is being brave enough, even when you haven't got the revenue coming in, to say no to the temptation of doing things outside of what you have clarified. And I've learned that the hard way over the last year is, yeah, I had to pay bills to start with and I had some bandwidth to do things. And then eventually I've started to build more on the things that I know that we want to focus on that's scalable. And I've started to turn away other things. And it's gotten easier to do that, but it is very, very hard when you're struggling to pay the bills to say, I like what you've come to me with, but it's not what we do. You probably want to go to this person over here, and to stick to your guns and have faith that what you're trying to deliver is the thing that will drive your business forward. But absolutely plays into what you've just said in, if you try and do everything, you'll end up doing nothing. Perfect. I guess, is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with? 20 minutes, got a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you small, medium business owners today some kind of any knowledge that you'd like to pass on as a last sort of throwback to what you would have passed on to yourself many years ago?
I think, and this also comes from what I do on a daily basis, but management wise, like really, when you're broken down your process, you really, really need to learn to delegate, right? And you like, particularly in the early days, as you say, it can be hard from a cost perspective, right? But you really want to break down things. Organization fundamentally exists for the specialization of labor. And what that means is many people try and duplicate themselves. They're like, oh, if I just had someone else like me, then, I could do a lot more. And yeah, you could, but that's not, the problem is if you duplicate yourself, if you have two of you, number one, you get absolutely dependent on that human being. If they leave, you're utterly screwed, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is organizations exist for the specialization of labor, meaning you take a process and you break it into steps. And you do that for a very, very key reason, because you want to make sure that when you're executing processes, that people are doing small steps so that they can learn them faster. If you need to teach someone how to do social media, they can easily spend like years learning that. If you need to teach someone how to, for example, do Instagram Reels really good, they can learn that much faster. So the whole point is you have something to deliver. You want to break that down into steps so that you can hire individual people for individual steps. That does two key things. Number one, it helps you to scale and grow faster. So when if you suddenly get a lot more customers, you can grow a lot faster, because training a new person take you maybe 2 weeks instead of 2 years, right? And number two is it also makes you less vulnerable, because if an employee leaves, you don't have to spend like a year training someone else. You can train someone else at a very fast pace, right? So it puts you in a position where you have much more flexibility, and it enables you to really grow much faster. And I think from the companies I've built, that's definitely been sort of one of the absolute main skills that have helped me big time. I had to learn this the very, very hard way in the corporate world, but I've been lucky enough to benefit that from in my entrepreneurial career, where I've really had the opportunity to grow and scale businesses really fast. And although I had a couple of business sales so far, so we've sold a couple of businesses, and again, it's significantly easier to sell a business if it can run by itself, right? So nowadays I spend about each summer. I typically go from April to end of July or so, and I travel around the world. So I either go to Europe, North America, the likes. I do a lot of speaking gigs, and for 3 or 4 months, I work very, very little. The ability to do that is only because I have business that can run themselves, or like businesses that can run on their own. Right?
Fantastic. It's been fascinating to chat with you today, Matt. Thank you very much for coming along and being our guest for episode 12 we're at now. If people want to reach out and network with you or want to ask your advice on anything, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah. mattsingers.com is my website. You can find me anywhere, any social media. Mads, MADS, and then SIGERS. I'm the only person in the world with that name, and I am on most social platforms. So lots of opportunity to connect.
It's great for SEO, right?
Definitely.
Love it.
Definitely.
Thanks very much for joining us today. And if you've enjoyed the episode, please come back for next week's episode for another fantastic guest here on MarketPulse Pros and Pioneers.
Thanks for joining us for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to feature on a future show, or you've got some ideas for folks who would make a great guest, please drop us a line. The contact details are in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Your host today was Paul Banks, founder at Javelin Content Management. Javelin specializes in helping busy business owners just like you to repurpose video content, taking all the stress and tech problems away, and turning your long-form video into literally hundreds of pieces of content without breaking the bank. If you want to launch your personal brand, become the vendor of choice for your audience, or maximize your sales revenue impact, we'd love to hear from you. Join us next week for the next episode, and don't forget to give us a subscribe and a review. Our podcast is only possible with your support.